but I have to go for a laser treatment on my left eye, laser surgery on my left eye in a few. So I'm gonna stay on for a few.
If you come over here, I'll do it for free.
Yeah, right. Then I'll be blind. I got to
Mike,
see.
I'm gonna call on you to do the moment of silence if you don't mind.
Excuse me?
I was trying to get Councilmember Seeking's attention.
You got it.
He's right there.
I know.
You've got my attention.
I was going to ask you to do the moment of
And
silence.
you're going to keep it for exactly 60 minutes, and then I'm leaving.
Good
You
luck.
ready? Have we begun?
We got
Yes,
a
you can
forum.
go ahead and
I'm
begin.
waiting for the
your
mayor.
item two.
Hey, Mike, hold on for a second. Peter, go ahead and start. Peter, if you
All
want to
right, I
start.
think
go
we got
ahead.
a forum present, and we are live. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Yes,
Okay. I'm gonna call the order the Public Safety Committee meeting of September the 12th, 2022. Announce Councilmember Seeking to either lead us with a prayer or a moment of silence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could begin with a moment of silence, and as we do, keep in our memories and our hearts those who have been victims of violent crime. Amen, and thank you.
Amen.
Man.
Thank you for that. I'll entertain a motion to adopt, approve our minutes of August the 16th, 2022.
So move.
Is there a second? Is there a second to approve the minutes?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. I'm gonna call on Steve Rumlin to address items number 3 through 7. If we could. Steve, are you with us? There you are.
Yes, sir. So 3 of those are renewals of our SRO contracts, Charleston County, Berkeley County, and James Island Charter High School. The terms of those agreements are largely as they were last year, including the compensation. If anyone has any questions on those, I'd be happy to entertain them. Otherwise, I'll move on to the other ones.
And those, Steve, are pretty consistent with what we've had in the past. Is that correct?
That's correct. Same schools, basically same number of officers, same compensation.
And that would be items number 4, 5, and 6 on our agenda.
Right.
I'll entertain a motion to adopt items, approve items 4, 5, and 6.
So moved.
Second.
Second, thank you. Any discussion or questions for Mr. Rumlin? Seeing that, all those in favor of approving 4, 5, and 6, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, Steve, then we got 3 and 7.
Right. Now, these are basically task force agreements. One's the DEA task force. We are already a participant in that. We're adding a officer to that task force to fill a slot that was vacant. We'll have 2 officers on there, and I'll just note that this underlying agreement is coming up for renewal at the end of this month. So this addendum will take us to the end of that contract, so we don't lose that spot. But then we'll be coming back to council again to approve another DEA agreement.
And how many officers are we dedicating to that task force for the
There'll be
DEA?
2 on there.
Okay, then item number 7.
And again, we're part of the Seahawk. That's the U.S. Coast Guard. It's a conglomeration of federal, state, and local agencies providing maritime security, marine security in the Charleston area. We're already a member of that, but they're forming an executive steering committee, working on some standard operating procedures, and basically getting together the executives of the different agencies to kind of look at the role of this this task force on a broader level, a higher level.
Very good. All right, are there any questions for Mr. Rumlin as to items 3 and 7, like the committee members?
None.
I'll entertain a motion to
Move
approve
for
items
approval.
number 3 and 7.
Move for approval.
There was a second by the mayor. Any further discussion or questions? I'll call the vote. All those in favor of approving 3 and 7, these memorandum of understanding with DEA and with the Charleston Coast Guard, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
It looks like the ayes have it. All right, Steve, thank you. I know we ran through that pretty quickly, but I do appreciate the work you do behind the scenes on getting this set up for us and making sure we got all this taken care of properly. The other item on our agenda is item number 8, which I wanted to get to as quickly as possible. And this is the after action report regarding the South Street shootings, that shooting that took place on Memorial Day weekend. And Heather, I believe that you're going to lead the charge on this. Is that correct? Heather? You're muted, Heather.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yes, I will. Yes.
Okay. All right, once you take us down. For the-
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heather Malloy. And for those of you who do not know me, I am an assistant corporation counsel for the city, and I am assigned to the Charleston Police Department. The department has asked me to present you today an overview of their after action report regarding the shooting incident that occurred on May 30th of this past year. And in doing so, I'm going to go over a memo that the chief presented to the mayor this afternoon, and all the council members should have present here should have a copy of that by now. And I'm going to go over that memo, which encompasses the details regarding the after action report. In doing so, if you take a look at the memo, it's divided into 3 portions. There's an executive summary. The second part is the actual after action review that was conducted by the department. And then finally, the third part of the memo concerns the final thoughts and conclusions of the chief. The chief will address those issues, and I'll go over the actual executive summary and the after action report. So in performing this after action report, the Charleston Police Department looked at several factors, and this is a standard practice for the department. When there's a large event that occurs in the city, as they've done before, and you all are aware of that, the department will undergo these types of reviews so that they can look at what they can learn, lessons learned, and also positive practices. So they look at the good, the bad, and the ugly when they look at these issues. In this instance, we know we had a shooting on May 30th in the city. The shooting resulted in 10 people being injured. 9 of them sustained gunshot wounds. There were also 3 police officers that were injured in this incident on that night on South Street. And one of the officers was a CPD officer. His police vehicle was shot at when he arrived. He was responding to a nuisance call, arrived on the scene, and his marked cruiser sustained gunfire. He was injured when one of the bullets struck the glass windshield, and he received some glass shrapnel on his arm and was injured. So as part of this review, the department went backwards. They looked at 2 other large parties that had occurred in the past summer. And the first one was on April 28th. And then the second one was on May 28th. I'm sorry, that's April 30th. So it's April 30th, May 28th, and then May 30th. And in summary, what the department found were a few things. First of all, they noticed that there's this ongoing nationwide trend towards these new types of pop-up parties. They are, the word is spread through social media quickly, and a lot of these parties grow rapidly in size. There's not always intelligence that the police have beforehand. and they spread around rather quickly. And another important aspect that was found about these parties is that they often contain individuals that are confrontational to the police, and they are there to do no good. So it's kind of a different animal that the police have noticed has been emerging. Typically, the police found that when they respond to large parties within the city, they are able to disperse them quite easily. They can work with a landowner, homeowner, talk to them, and then the party can be dispersed. With these types of new parties, it's a little different because you have that confrontational aspect and there's some criminal element involved. So the response is going to be different. And the analysis found that because these are now appearing within our area, the police now have to change the way they handle things. There was a party after on April 30th, large party, large gathering. And CPD responded in a typical fashion, responding to individual calls for service, that was done, but then monitoring the situation and until it dispersed on its own. And that's what they did on April 30th. And it was effective. Now, there were certainly disturbances that were involved, but there were no major incidents. And so that is how that was effectively handled. The analysis found that following that first party, there were some contacts with concerned citizens about the way CPD handled that party, how they responded. And there was concern that CPD did not disperse that party, that that's what they should have done in that instance. Well, in response, there was an executive level directive following that first party to shut these parties down. That was the directive that was given on that level. Then we come to the May 30th party. Again, a similar large, fast-growing party, limited intelligence on the part of CPD. In response to that party, CPD responded to calls for service again, monitored the party by having police presence, and then the party dispersed on its own. No major incidents, no arrests. There were no changes in the way that was handled from the first one. And then we have our May 30th party a couple days later. Again, and in that instance, there was no prior intelligence at all on that party. And the party started at a particular residence. And again, CPD responded by coming to individual calls for service and responding to those, and then sending patrol officers out for officer presence and monitoring of the parties. And in this instance, the party did not disperse on its own. And we know that this evolved into shots being fired. When the shots were fired, there was a tremendous response across the low country in that event. But still focusing on the prior events, the findings were, one, that there was a delay in implementation of that executive command directive to shut parties down. The directive was given, of course, after April 30th, but the parties on May 20th and May 30th were not shut down. And in looking at the particulars and what happened in that incident, it became clear that there was a difference between giving the executive command to shut down the parties and actually having a process and an understanding of how to accomplish that objective. The CPD really understood how to shut down parties without these aspects of confrontational individuals. They had done it successfully in the past. In this instance, you could not use those same tactics. So between the directive and the actual developing a procedure and a way to shut the parties down, there was not an accomplishment of the objective. The officers on the street, the command duty officers and sergeants, didn't have an understanding of how that could be accomplished. So by the time these other parties occurred, the parties were not shut down. So regarding the actual after action review, there were certain categories that were looked at. Before I get into let me hit on the response to the shootings too, because there were 2 responses on May 30th from CPD. We went over the previous parties and we went over the party that occurred on May 30th on South Street. But then we know that there was a shooting that occurred that evening at about 11:40 p.m. And a lot of the calls for service were reviewed and listened to, and coming up with this analysis to determine what CPD's response was. So the shooting occurred at 11:40 p.m. That's when the individual officer had arrived and his marked cruiser, and he took gunfire. Calls went out following the shooting, and we know there were injuries that were involved with citizens, but there was a tremendous response of mutual aid that came out to help. First responders and officers across the area immediately responded, and there were multiple shootings that were occurring at that time, and again, a notation of a very confrontational and aggressive crowd at that moment. The order to that area was quickly restored and life-saving measures were immediately taken. There were approximately 90 CPD officers, both on duty and off duty, that arrived once the shootings occurred, and 70 officers from outside agencies. And here's just a list of the agencies that quickly responded, in addition to our CPD officers: North Charleston, Charleston County Sheriffs, Berkeley County Sheriffs, Mount Pleasant, College of Charleston, MUSC, and South Carolina Highway Patrol. Our fire department and EMS responded immediately as well. So there was a very effective response in stabilizing of the scene once that violence broke out. Regarding investigations and arrests following the party and the shooting, there is one subject who was charged with 5 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of possession of a firearm during the commission of a violent crime, 1 arrest for disorderly conduct, and 2 Charleston County Sheriff Office arrests relating to assaults. The investigation is still ongoing. There is a tremendous amount of material to go through, evidence, videos, etc. So this investigation is still open and ongoing. So regarding the actual review, the police department separated that into positive practices, what they did well in response, and lessons learned and corrective actions that need to be taken. Positive practices was the intelligence and information sharing. There's a notation that these new types of events can rapidly grow. So information sharing is critically important for these parties. And there's a note to encourage citizens to continue to share information with CPD to assist them in their awareness of the parties. Mutual aid, that's also a positive practice that occurred. I already mentioned the outside agencies that really came to aid very, very quickly once the call came out. Life-saving measures were very effective to the injured individuals. The officers were trained and they had their tourniquets and applied them to numerous victims to reduce the loss of life. There were some issues regarding supplies and running out of supplies. And since that time, CPD has ordered and provided the patrol supervisors with additional mass casualty kits and additional tourniquets. And there's ongoing training every year regarding tourniquet application. Regarding an evaluation of training in CPD's response, CPD found that the civil disturbance training was beneficial, very useful on the scene. Some of the officers were not expecting to use similar tactics that they usually use in civil disturbance training. This is the shift and the response that I was talking about with this type of activity, a shift in the way you do things, a shift in the way you respond, which is what I'm trying to explain is where the gap is between giving the directive to shut down and then actually learning how to do that and an effective way to do that. The training is continuing, the civil disturbance training that goes on yearly. Regarding command and control of the situation, again, another positive practice. Once the commanders arrived following the shooting, the incident command system was quickly set up. It fell into place. It was effective and well organized. The shooting scene was stabilized. Staging locations were managed. There was personnel accountability put in place, and safety officers were identified. The public information team responded, and a media briefing was coordinated within a few hours of the stabilization of the event. Another positive practice we have within the city when it's followed is the permitting process. So the city does have a permitting process for these types of large events through the Special Events Committee, but that process was not followed in this instance. So in addition to the positive practice, the CPD looked at the lessons learned and any corrective actions that may need to be taken. The main one, which I've touched on already, is clear expectations and clear communications. So the finding was that the process for translating these changes and practices and how to respond to this new type of party with the confrontational and criminal element needs improvement. And despite the command staff's order to disperse these large, fast-growing pop-up parties, the expectations and information regarding the steps to achieve the objective were not clearly understood by the command duty officers, by the supervisors, and officers responding to the scene. So there are several action items underneath that lessons learned category for CPD to take, and several of them have already been done and are complete. The first action piece is command duty officers and supervisors have been given a clear directive and guidelines on how to handle large pop-up parties that rapidly increase in size involving confrontational individuals. So that directive and that guidance on how to handle them has been solved, and that information has been given to officers. The next action step, command duty officers now meet on a weekly basis with the deputy chief of operations or his designee to discuss current issues prior to the CDO's rotation to ensure that expectations are understood. That's part of that clarity of communication and making sure that the command duty officer has the information about what is going on in the area and any other helpful information that may be needed prior to going on duty. Another action step that was noted in this category is CPD continues to improve its use of internal rostering systems that enable supervisors to immediately review the availability of additional personnel when needed. Part of the clarity that was needed on that night was the availability of resources and how to obtain those resources. So again, there was a directive, but not a clear understanding of how to carry out this new way of responding to this type of party. There is also a lesson learned on scene management. After the shots were fired, the command duty officer responded directly to the scene. Although the CDO initially faced challenges in managing both the scene and the response due to it being a very chaotic environment, he initiated a CPD command notification, which allowed for a command response that has resolved the issues. So there was some initial confusion at that point, but then it fell neatly into place. And as I mentioned, there's always ongoing training in that area. So the next part of the after action review is always what steps do we take? we've come and analyzed what we did well and what we need improvement on, but what are we going to do next? So when you look at the memo, you'll see there's a section on steps taken immediately following May 30th, and also some of the actions that are in progress. I'll briefly go over those so that you can understand what the status quo is right now. So the immediate steps that CPD took following the May 30th shooting were as follows. On June 1st, an incident action plan was implemented to provide a continued presence on South Street in the area with additional officers and also to address any community concerns in that area. There were officers placed there to maintain a high visibility and engage with the community and also conduct foot patrols. After 30 days, the plan concluded after no further incidents occurred. Additionally, on June 1st, the owner of a vacant lot on South Street that was utilized by some of these large crowds during these pop-up parties permitted CPD to go and place no trespassing signs on that vacant lot and place barricades on the property, and also request removal of any unauthorized persons and vehicles on the property. Team 1 officers, that's the Team 1 area where South Street is, have conducted patrols regularly to ensure that the signs on that property are complied with per that owner's request. So part of the review showed that there were there was one particular vacant property where some of the party goers would gather, and the owner actually did not know his property was being utilized for that and did not agree with it. So CPD was able to reach out and resolve that and put some fencing up. Then there's also an immediate action that occurred after the shooting. Residents on South Street were evicted due to incidents involving lease violations. So there were some livability type actions that were taken with residents that were causing trouble and had lease violations, and they were evicted in that incident. Additionally, 2 homeowners on South Street where the party started on May 30th were issued public nuisance citations for holding this party. Command duty officers were given updates by the legal staff regarding criminal statutes and ordinance in place to address unlawful events. So there was an immediate effort to address any livability issues that could be corrected following these large gatherings. The Livability Division and Patrol Commander continue to work together to identify owners of vacant lots and homes on the east side. And so this is a continuing practice to see if there are any vacant properties or any other livability issues that can be addressed. The Patrol Division Commander and Team 1 Commander continue to attend East Side Neighborhood Associated meetings and events on the East Side to listen to concerns and discuss solutions. Officers and supervisors, again, immediately following the shooting, were reminded of guidelines and departmental expectations regarding the response to these large parties with confrontational individuals. So the next steps and actions in progress, there are 6 of them. 1, continue to meet with patrol officers and frontline supervisors to discuss these positive practices and lessons learned. Commanders will continue to review the policies regarding these aspects of the review, ensure they're being addressed, ensure training is being done and it's ongoing, and that the communications are clear and the procedures are implemented and followed. CPD commanders will also continue to work with the legal community to review the laws regarding nuisance abatement and accountability for homeowners and landlords. CPD will continue to engage with the neighborhoods, community leaders, and city officials to reduce the likelihood of such confrontational parties and address problems in the community and focus on the root causes of the problems. In addition to the weekly command staff crime intelligence briefings, the Operations Bureau Deputy Chief will continue to hold these one-on-one meetings with the command duty officer to ensure that emerging crime trends, ongoing investigations, incident action plans, special events are reviewed prior to the command duty officer going on duty. A reference guide it is already being provided to these command duty officers, and they will be given the opportunity to ask any questions so that there is clarity. Finally, many efforts have been in progress to support the East Side prior to this incident, and CPD will continue to provide the East Side Initiative updates through the East Side Quarterly Update provided to the mayor's office. So that is the end of my presentation of the after action report. There are more details regarding the parties in the report than I touched on. I did give you a basic summary. However, I've gone over all the positive practices, lessons learned, and next steps. The chief will be addressing the final portion of the after action report regarding conclusions and final thoughts. But if you have any questions for me, I don't know if you want to ask me now or later.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the chief.
Before we get to the chief, I got two questions for you, Heather. When we are describing the number of people who were injured, you said 10 plus 3 officers. Were the 10 civilians and plus 3 officers for a
Yeah,
total
10.
of
Yes,
for a total of 13 people?
Yes, 10 were citizens, 9 of the 10 sustained gunshot wounds. And then an additional 3 officers were injured.
And when the first shot was fired, is there any indication of what precipitated that shooting?
So I don't have that information. The investigation is ongoing. The after action review didn't really get into that just because of the confidentiality of the investigation, the fact that the evidence is still being reviewed. And I don't know if anyone else wants to address that, but I don't want to compromise the investigation at the same time.
I'll be addressing that in my comments.
Okay, all right, Chief. But it was clearly that the first shot was directed at the officer who was the one who responded to the call.
That's still under investigation, and there's, I think, more to that.
Before we go to the chief, any member of the committee have any questions for Heather besides what I've asked?
I don't have a question.
All right, we're gonna go to the, you want to go to the chief's report, Councilmember Mitchell, or?
Well, I'm gonna have to leave in about 5 minutes
Well, go ahead then.
to go to have my surgery done. But I spoke to the chief prior to this, after the incident, and my only when I saw what happened and when I was out there, I stayed out there from 12:30 until 8 o'clock that morning. And it was myself and Mr. Steve Alston and Mr. Edward Jones. When they called me, I was out there from that time, from 7:30 until sun came up to 8 o'clock that morning. And speaking to a lot of the residents on the east side at the time, what happened and with the information that I received, and I just say the information that I received, I don't know how true it is or not, but speaking to all the people, even some people in South Street, was the first incident when this party started. This incident started with the party of having a birthday party for the 97 or 90 something years old mother, grandmother, or mother, or whoever it was at the time. And they was using that same lot that was next door to their home, which is probably was not correct to use, but that's what they were using. And that party was going on, and one of the residents on the on South Street called because of noise, whatever the case may be. And the patrol came out, and I think just and spoken to the residents who was having the party at the time. And the party still went on because they said on private property, you couldn't enter on private property. So after that went on, then there was a party in the Wanamaker Park, started in North Charleston. That party was dispersed, and they left there and went to Mount Pleasant. And over Mount Pleasant, they dispersed it over there. Someone put it on social media that they was having a party on South Street. So everyone from those particular parties came down on South Street. And that's when this thing got really blown out of proportion, because these parties was a graduation party of people who was graduating from school. And that's how it came about when the social media got a hold of it. Then everyone came down on South Street. So when I looked at it, must be probably was over 100 people out there so far as I could see, or more. And I told the chief the only problem that I had was when the officer was passing by and they saw that people were in the street. They were not on public private property anymore. When they dispersed in the street, it should have been, to me, shut down at that time. That was my take on it. And that was before this incident happened with the shooting. So if it was dispersed during that time, I think we could have alleviated some of these things that was happening at the time. And that was my only dilemma on that, on the proposal, what happened in that community. I said, anytime and they didn't have permits or nothing like that. So anytime when the party dispersed into that street, they are not on private property anymore. They didn't have the right to be out there because they didn't have any permit. So when they see that, when the officers was passing by and they noticed that to me should have been shut down. It should have been dispersed before it really got out of hand. And that was my dilemma on the whole procedure at the time. And I relayed this to the chief also. I spoke to him about it. The chief will tell you I spoke to him about it. And that's the only problem I had with it, that once it came out in that street, it should have been dispersed. And I think we could alleviate some of these things that had taken place, because that's before the shooting. And that could have probably kind of eliminated some of this. But, I don't know all the procedures that you have to go through. But this is what I noticed because I was out there. And when I saw when all the policemen came, the county, the state, North Charleston, Mount Pleasant, and all these officers came, then I was out there when all of them was out there. I can't go in the crime scene, so I was just standing there and speaking to some of the officers. So that's the only dilemma that I saw with it. Once we see something that's in the public realm coming out into the public, into the streets and things, it should be shut down when they don't have a permit. And not waiting to see what's going to happen, because anytime we have a big crowd like that, something is surely going to happen. And my take, if they don't have a permit to do it, because when they have a permit, then the officers will be out there to manage it. If you're having a party or something and you have a permit to be out there in that particular realm, because the streets will be blocked and things like that. So that's just my take. Me on council so long, that's my take on things. And that's the only problem that I had seen with it. And I relayed that to the chief myself, on a personal basis. I relayed that to him. And that's the only dilemma I saw. And I think that would kind of really would have kind of hold back what we going through right now with the shooting and all other things where the officers got hurt. And then the second thing is that a lot of the community was angry. I relayed this to the chief also, that when the press conference was held by the chief and the mayor, a lot of the community members got upset because they said it seemed like everything was relaying to the officers and not the citizens that got hurt in the community also. So they got a little upset about that. And they were angry about it, and they're still angry about that. They said, they don't think about the citizens that's got hurt. All they're thinking about is the police officers. And I said, well, this is what they see. He said, no. He said, he should come on in and talk about all, not just saying, our officers is this, and the officers got shot, and the officers got hurt, and this. So this is a dilemma, and this is what got them upset in the community, which they still are, pertaining to it. So I hear all these kickback because they're going to jump on me about pertaining to all of it, because I'm out there every day I'm out there all night till 1 o'clock in the morning, 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning. So these are the things that I'm hearing from the community. And that's when I mentioned it to Councilman Shade, who was over the public safety, and I mentioned it to him also. And this is the dilemma that they have, and they saw this press conference, you see. And I didn't attend the press conference, but this is what they heard about it, and this is what they saw in the press conference. So they feel that you're not thinking of nothing about the community. You're just thinking about one entity, which is the officers. So these are the things that I wanted to kind of throw out and let you know exactly what they're saying about it.
Councilman Mitchell, thank you for hanging around, and good luck with your surgery. And I appreciate your insights on all of this. And that's why I asked the question early on, to make sure that everybody understood the number of people who were injured. These are human beings, regardless if you wear a uniform or not, who got injured out there. I appreciate Heather clarifying that for us. The number of civilians who were injured, and the arrest that was made immediately following that incident.
Yes, and thank you. And I'm happy to see that they are making some changes. They're making some things. The police officers, the department is making some changes to really look at what transpired and how they can do it better and things like this. And these are some of the things we're gonna have to relate to the community to see if they would, kind of go along with what's going to take place afterwards. But these things need to be addressed also. So I'm gonna have to really leave the meeting, because I have to be over there around 10 after 3. So I'm gonna have to go West Ashley and take care of this and take care of my eyes so I can be able to see some more.
And Councilman Mitchell, before you head out, you and I have discussed, and we talked with the chief and the mayor about this. I think it would behoove us to have an opportunity to engage in the public more directly with this and hear from them following this meeting, which you and I have chatted about. I'd like to follow through with that with you in the immediate future as well.
Yes, we're going to talk about that, because we also have to kind of talk about the young man who got killed. Not killed. I'm sorry to say killed.
The 10-year-old.
The 10-year-old got shot, and I was out there, and Councilman Shade, we were out there. We kind of took care of the rear by walking along with the young people that wanted to go out there on their own from the school. They wanted to do this. And I told the community, I said, I don't need to see a whole bunch of adults out there walking with the young people, because this is something they want to do. They want to do, and we don't want to take the focus of the young people. So the school, Sanders Clyde School, and the principal and the teachers, they all were out there. The police officers were out there, and they manned the whole various areas. They did a good job in manning the areas to make sure everything was safe. These young people walked America Street down to what street was it? Harris Street, and walk around the whole block and came back to the school with their signs. Even the young man, the young 10-year-old got shot. He was in a wheelchair. They was pushing him around, and the youth themselves wanted to do this. This was something they wanted to do. So I applaud them for that. And I made sure that, and I told them, I said, if a lot of adults going to be out there, I'm not going to be a part of it, because the young people wanted to do this. We don't want to take the focus of young people, so people can see that young people are concerned about safety, concerned of what they have to go through in these communities. So that was something that we're going to need to address with them too. But I can tell them gun violence is everywhere, and it's hard, very hard to deal with this gun violence. And I said, even since the state passed the open carry, which I didn't like it, which I spoke about it, against it, but it is what it is, and I told the police officer can't do it so much, because they can't even stop you if you have a weapon on you, to ask you if you have a weapon until you commit a crime, and that's after the fact. So it put them in a dilemma also. So these are things that I don't know how we can solve it, how we can deal with it, because it is already here and it is what it is. So those are the things that is crowding my mind and trying to deal with all of that and what's going on. And you have young people, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, that's carrying these weapons, and they're using some powerful weapons out there now. And I said that young man, a young student, 10 years old, with the shots that was fired, is amazed that he is still living with all the shots that was fired out there that particular day. And I went out there at night when they called me. I went out. I go out to all things that's happening in the community I represent. And I spoke to the grandmother and everything and assured that we are doing the best we can and things like that. So these are the things that kind of weigh me down a little bit in trying to see what we can do better, what we can do to try to assist in solving these things. Maybe we might have to contact our state legislative, our state senator. We need help from all of them. They represent these areas, so they need to come out there too. And I told them, not only seeing me, they need to be out here too. The county council members, the state representative, the state senator, that they can take some things back and try to get something done to help our police department to get some things done too. So I don't mean to speak so much, but these are things that I'm really adamant about, because I'm out there and just being on council all these years, I'm adamant about that and seeing so many changes taking place. And it's kind of bad.
Councilmember Mitchell, no one's going to ever complain about your zeal and enthusiasm for your community and your love for the city of Charleston. And you and I were walking together last week. We hung in the background because, as you said, this was the day for those children. And that young man is a miracle. He's still able to attend that rally, and it was really very moving. And I appreciated the opportunity to be with you last week for that peace rally. So thank you. I know you got to shove off, but we're going to hear from the chief.
Just keep me informed, and then chief can call me. But just keep me informed what transpired and what else be next step that we might have, and then we'll go from that point. And thank you all very much.
Good luck. Good luck with your surgery. Take care.
Take care.
All right. I see Councilmember Shealy has joined us as well, so we're still good for our forum. Chief, you want to pick up from where Heather just left off with the final aspect of this after action report?
Sure, and I can't help but acknowledge Councilmember Mitchell's comments. I think, as usual, he knows what time it is in his community. I think what he said was spot on. The one area that if we have to keep working on it, certainly the mayor and I and others will do that. The one thing that he said is that people feel like we spent more time talking about the officers than the victims. I'm sorry to hear that, because I will tell you that I speak passionately about the mothers who have lost their children by name. Monica Jefferson lost her son, Malcolm, on his 21st birthday. Malik Nelson and Gadsden Green. I could go on and on. I won't do that, but I will tell you, since we're talking about gun violence, and it is something that I planned on talking about, and I'll segue into that as we complete this after action. We have a problem with gun violence in our communities. We've had a 9-year-old shot. We've had a 10-year-old shot. We've had a 13-year-old shot. We have we arrested people at least on 2 occasions last week, towards the end of the week, with guns on their way to school. We have people in middle school that are carrying guns to school and flashing gang signs. I could go on and on and on. We have a major gun violence problem. We arrested 3, I think, Saturday night on King Street.
Chief, I'm going to interrupt you for a second so we get focused back on just the after action report. We can come back to what you're saying. I don't mean to interrupt you about. That's very important. What you want to relate to us, but can we just sort of get back to the after action report first, please?
Sure. Part of the after action is number 1 on my list is gun violence. I won't elaborate anymore. We had 9 people shot. As we've talked about, we had an officer's cruiser had multiple rounds to include in the headrest of his car. We're very fortunate that we didn't have a serious injury to the officer. We had multiple injuries to other people. I think one of the victims was pregnant female. And I, because of HIPAA and other things, I can't go into great detail in a press conference or in this in terms of the exact injuries. But I can tell you every one of those victims means something to me and our department and our mission and what we do. We're working very closely with our federal, state, and local partners, and it affects events like this. It's absolutely relevant to this conversation. All the things that we're doing and all the experiences that we're having with the youth in our community. It was mentioned, I think, by Councilmember Mitchell. These are not just handguns with low caliber rounds. These include rifles, including that night with .223 and other rounds. And if you don't know what those do, they use those traditionally in the military theater, and they will literally blow the head off your shoulders. We've seen that happen in our community in different events, and that could have happened this night on the East Side. I will tell you that we just made an arrest on the King Street shooting. You'll hear more about that. And it's all tied together. And it's these criminal element, violent offenders who choose to carry guns in our communities, who choose to violate the law. And there's another person that we charged, an additional person involved in the King Street event that was shot and hospitalized, and he had a gun and he fired his gun as well. So there'll be
How
more.
old were the, Chief, how old are those two people you just described?
One of them was 16. And I can tell you, without getting into sealed records and juveniles and all that kind of stuff, I hope that his name will be released if legally we're able to, because of the seriousness of these offenses. Number one, and number two, I can tell you, there's in most of these cases, there's an extensive track record. This is not the first go round. And the other person, I'm not sure the age, they were an adult, young adult. We have done a lot on the East Side, which again is tied into this, a tremendous amount of work on the East Side initiatives, problem-solving efforts, working with livability, with the fire marshals, with the police department, legal, and the city. In terms of nuisance abatement, that's something that was covered. It was part of the after action to make sure that we're solving these problems and addressing them in other creative ways as a shared responsibility, not just relying on the police to respond to events like this. Building on the partnerships and relationships, trying to identify and work with the landowners and the leaseholders. And I'll tell you, in terms of the lessons learned, I don't think it could have been better stated than what Councilmember Mitchell said. We have a directive that a party that is out of control, where you have people that are in the streets, that are blocking vehicular or pedestrian traffic, that are creating a nuisance in terms of loud noise, or there's a whole variety of things that are disorderly associated with events like this, that we get the right amount of resources. And typically in a beat in the city on a given night, you don't have a whole lot of resources. They're running call to call to call. They're doing a lot of different things, but there were 60 officers working that night. We have the ability to go and reach out to other teams and bring resources in. We do that on a variety of different events on a fairly regular basis. That did not occur on the 30th. And so that's the follow-up to this, if you will, is that the supervisor knows how to identify an event like this. They know who to talk to. The CDO, the command duty officer, knows what to do and how to get those resources in place and how to do what we do very well. And that is, in this case, to shut the party down as early as possible, to be a presence. And that did not happen on the 30th, not quickly enough. To be assertive, to be proactive. Some of the good things that came out of our after action report, things that have been learned over the last few years. We've gotten a lot of repetitions, and some of this actually was implemented in King Street a week or so ago very well, very successfully, and it was a very big positive, is incident command system and implementing that with command and control. We had a lot of mutual aid from other agencies that was very helpful. Restoring order in the community, rendering medical aid to all those people that need life-saving measures like tourniquets, chest wound bandages, and other things. And I'll tell you, the sad thing is in these incidents, and Heather kind of touched on it, they're actually hostile towards the police and attacking the police. It's not like, hey, thanks for being here, we'll turn the music down. It's kind of quite the opposite. And you had people from a lot of different places from throughout the region. It was very difficult for the officers, and it was potentially very deadly for the community that was affected and impacted by this. I'll just say I'm very proud of our officers. They were courageous, they were heroic, they were resourceful. It was a very traumatic incident for them, for those that were involved. There's some things that we're focusing on more with wellness and how we can communicate better with our officers to get them the right resources, how we can support them in an event like this, how we can get out to talk to them in their roll calls and give them the information that they need as an organization in helping them be successful. And in this case, we didn't get them the resources that they needed. They could have shut the party down. We will shut the party down moving forward. But in this case, that didn't happen. And I'll stop there and let you ask some questions.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor or Councilmember Seekings, y'all have any questions for either the chief or for Heather?
No, just thank you for reporting all this out. I mean, a lot of it is unsettling, I think, to the community, especially when we hear the ages of the people that are involved in some of these activities. You know, I like the analogy, Chief, that you pointed out that Councilmember Mitchell knows what time it is. And I think, you know, just for all of us, it's time to recognize that we need to do a little bit better. And we've got some challenges, but we need to step up to them for sure. I mean, I think that's the message that I'm hearing from the community. I don't think that differs across the board on this call or anywhere else in the city.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mayor, any comments or questions?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to thank Heather and the chief and our department for having this after action report. It's part of, I think, our ongoing goal of process improvement and leaving things better. It pointed out the challenge of the availability of guns, both legal and illegal in our community. But what occurs to me, the biggest challenge is the very low threshold upon which folks will use a gun. I mean, it's over the drop of a hat, it seems, in our society today that that folks who have guns will use them, compounded with the drug activity that I think was apparent at this particular incident and on that street. So the field judgment required to follow that directive that Chief Reynolds had given is quite important. You know, we've all any officer, I'm sure, who's had night duty at any time has experienced large parties in the past, but this certainly, as described, is a different kind of event. And Councilmember Mitchell hit the nail on the head. There are certain conditions that, when observed, I mean, purportedly, this started as a birthday party for a 90-something-year-old person, right? And clearly, it was something different than that, or became something different from that. And he very poignantly, you know, points out that when they've taken over the street, when folks are blocking the public right of way, they're not on public private property anymore. That certainly is a condition under this, I guess you'd say, new protocol that requires us to disperse and shut down the party. And even with that, I think having the necessary backup, given the number of people that had gathered and all, is a requirement. And apparently we just weren't there yet in terms of codifying, making that directive, you know, a working policy for folks out in the field. And unfortunately, it took this incident to get us there. But so I would just ask Chief to confirm to us that we are there now, and that directive is firmly embedded in our working practices amongst our folks out in the field. Is that correct?
It is, and you've asked me that privately, and I think it's important to ask that publicly as well. I mean, you've made that clear from the beginning that's you wanted to make sure that we've followed up and that this is not going to be the result in the future. And yes, I can tell you that we've had multiple meetings as a command. We've done some of the things, all of the things that Heather articulated that are in the report, and we're creating a culture where people can ask for resources and get them in place in a timely way to have the right outcome. And in this case, As Councilmember Mitchell said, there was 9 people that were whose lives were impacted, and there was an entire community who was impacted by this negatively. And we don't take that lightly, I promise. And yes, the answer is we have a protocol and resources and some training that has occurred a little bit. Although this is not particularly complicated, and I don't think it should become complicated, to make sure that we're getting the right outcomes as we've articulated and defined them.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, let me just thank again our partners that were so readily available to help us: Mount Pleasant, North Charleston, Berkeley, and Charleston counties, and of course our own Charleston Fire Department as well. Thanks to them for being ready to stand up at any time and help us no matter what the circumstance.
And I would add, without hesitation, we're very fortunate.
Councilmember Shealy, I know you jumped in a little bit later, but hopefully you got the memorandum that we were discussing about this after action report. Any questions, comments you wish to share?
No questions, but thank you, Chief, and Ms. Malloy. Thank you very much for the after report. Thank you. And I'm sorry I was late.
A good meeting. I noticed that Captain Middleton is on this Zoom meeting with us, and the chief informed me earlier that Captain Middleton, after 30 years, is going to retire. Captain Middleton, are you still with us?
I am. Thank you for the recognition. I just wanted to tell everyone thank you for the opportunity that the city of Charleston has given to me and my family. I'm very grateful. It's been 31 years. Doesn't seem like it's been that long. It's been a really good career. I met a lot of quality people and established a lot of lifelong friendships. And I just wanted to thank the city for providing me with this opportunity fresh out of college. And like I said, it's been a good ride, and I appreciate all the help and assistance I've had along the way. So thank you.
Well, I understand, Captain, that you're not totally leaving law enforcement. I think you're going over to the county. Is that correct?
Now, that's not accurate. I am leaving law enforcement. I'll be going over with the Charleston County government in a civilian position. So it's totally different from law enforcement. But it's a new opportunity, a new challenge, and I'm definitely looking forward to it and excited about it. So thank you.
But we appreciate your service to the community. We appreciate your service to the Charleston Police Department, to citizens. And it looks like you're still going to be involved in some capacity serving your community. And we thank you for that. Wish you well in your future endeavors, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Chief and Heather, thank you all for y'all's report. It was very thorough. It was very straightforward. Some of the problems that we are facing in this community are not new problems, just to be quite frank with everybody. The problem is that it's the frequency and the age of our folks who are now carrying guns and becoming more violent. That seems to be a totally different phenomenon that we're just not used to and accustomed to. But drug issues have been with us for a number of years. These task forces that Steve Rummelin went over with us, I was involved in the creation of some of these violent crime task forces, served on some of these DEA task forces when I was a federal prosecutor. And we had local community involvement with this. And so folks do stupid things and very violent things back then for no reason at all. And it's a sad day when we see that occurring, but it appears to be occurring more frequently and with younger folks being engaged in that. And I appreciate the department being very forthright as to the 3 different events that occurred in late April, and then what occurred in between the day before the May 30th shooting. We've got to respond, and the scene could have been a lot worse. Needless to say, nobody died from this incident, but it just got out of hand completely, very quickly. And as I think either Heather or the chief said, there wasn't a whole lot of intelligence out there that we were able to intercept to prevent this from happening, but it did. And I think we're learning from this. And one of the things we learned is that sometimes the old ways and traditional ways of letting things sort of die out and dispersing peacefully, we need to interject ourselves a little bit sooner and with a bigger command. And that Chief, you and I have had that discussion at least 2 or 3 times about this. And we got the tools to implement that. We got the will to do it. I know we got the will to do it, and your department is well trained to handle that. And I know that will we'll see a positive impact on this. So thank you for being so forthright about it, and putting it out there. And we'll move forward from this point. I know your investigation is ongoing. Councilmember Appel, I see that you've been sitting in, listening in. Is there some comment before we sign off that you wish to share, or just we appreciate you listening in?
Thank you.
I want to
Chairman.
recognize you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Shea. That's awfully kind of you. I've got nothing to add. I just want to thank Chief and everybody involved in everything that they do. And I was just curious about this and just wanted to listen in. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you for joining us. All right. I'll make our clerk of council very happy that we're not running into our 3:30 meeting, and give everybody who's on the next meeting a little bit of breathing room. And we can finish this up a little bit earlier than scheduled. Good luck, Captain Middleton, on your new direction in your life. Heather, very good report. Appreciate the department being so cooperative and y'all working together. And Chief, as developments unravel with as the investigation is ongoing, I'm sure we'll hear from you as to how things unfold with the investigation. And appreciate you being on, and appreciate everybody else who was on this meeting for listening in. We are hereby adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.